Looks like we've got about 45 at the moment. Still really good numbers. Appreciate that training's starting to resume as well at the moment. So thank you to you guys that have made the effort to be with us tonight. We're looking at some stuff today around developing a season-long coaching program. Now that's come from a bit of feedback that we've received from many people that attended the last webinar with Graham Clark, one of the tutors who I know is on the webinar tonight as well. If you weren't present for that, Graham did a webinar on planning and practice design. That webinar will be on the County FA website in the coming weeks, so you'll be able to access that as well to see how these two hopefully link in with each other. So I'll be delivering tonight. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Rich Shuffleton. I am working for Durham County FA and leading the coach development side of things at present. We've got Andy Brown, who's on the call as well, from Durham County FA. And we've got Michael Bell, who's also Durham County FA, and he's the one that's letting people in at the moment. Now, my role tonight is going to be to kind of lead as much of the content as possible. Andy and Michael are going to chip in where possible, but they're also going to engage with the chat function. So we have got, if you see there will be a chat function if you go onto your main taskbar, if you've not been on before. What we want you to do is to try and ask as many questions, to check and challenge, and just to put your own kind of knowledge and experience in there as well as we go on through the evening. Now, we appreciate as members of staff and as tutors that the online platforms maybe not as real as the face-to-face stuff, but given the kind of current climate, this is something that we're working with just to try and provide a little bit of help and support. So first things first, all I want you to do, and as I say, Andy, more so probably now, and Michael a little bit, will monitor this and just give us a bit of an overview. In the chat function, can you just detail for us, just to begin with, just to give me and the boys a bit of insight, what experience you've currently got of developing a season-long coaching program? Now, if you don't have any, that's fine, pop that in as well. But if you do have some, if you can just pop that in for us now. And is that program for you, for your players, or a bit of both? So if you can just pop that in, just 30 seconds or so, a minute, if you can pop a bit of detail in. Thank you. Just to jump in as well, just at this point, I can't, because I'm controlling the presentation, I can't see any of the chat function, which is why Andy's going to be doing that. So I can't see anything you're putting at the moment. So Andy, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of the things that are in there at the moment, please?
Yeah, the common theme is there's either no plan as such at the moment, and it's very much based on how they played the last game. Some of, what's this one? Based on delivering plans designed by someone else. So yeah, it's a pretty common theme that there's no experience, or they tend to follow a set program which they've been given by the club as well.
Okay, lovely. Now, just to throw out there something that I didn't mention at the beginning, I'm not here tonight, and Andy's not, and Michael are not, to give you everything. We don't have everything. We're hopefully going to get a little bit of debate going. We're hopefully going to get you thinking a little bit and questioning maybe what you currently do, but we certainly don't have all the answers. What we do have within the group of about 50 people at the moment tonight is a range of experiences. We've got level 1 coaches all the way through to A licensed coaches, and we've got people working in the grassroots game, whilst we've also got people working in the elite pathway as well, so the boys and girls game. So hopefully some of the stuff that will come out in the chat function will also be really valuable stuff. So next one for me, just pop in there. If you are doing one, and appreciate a lot of you saying you're not at the moment, but if you do currently have coaching programs in place, what does it look like? Just a brief overview in terms of what you put into your coaching program and the makeup of what that looks like for me. Okay, just another minute or so on that, please. Obviously, if you've not done a coaching program before, you might just want to have a look at what's coming through just to start giving you a little bit of insight before we get into a bit of the meat as well. What kind of stuff are we getting through, Andy, at the moment?
We've had 2 in so far. So things like longer term plans, just to give some sort of direction as such. Maximum of 3 weeks of a theme, driven by the club. So again, that's steered. Spreadsheets based on 4-corner model, then weekly training. So some sort of structure there. Warm activity, then game. So again, there's some sort of structure there as well. Steve's got some experience of working with one, covered in out of possession based on areas of the field. Some are more reactive than planned long term. And then some based around how we play from like through the thirds and so on. So that's the messages that's coming through so far. In and out of possession for each around 2 weeks. Good.
Great stuff. Okay, last one for you then, and I won't keep you with this one based on what's come through so far, but if you have done a coaching program, or if you haven't and you're now considering maybe thinking about starting one, what currently informs that coaching program? Or if you're going to consider starting a coaching program for the coming season, what kind of things do you think would inform that program? So what would you be considering and thinking about when you're starting to plan and map out what you're going to do over the course of the season? So regardless of whether you've done one or not, just your considerations around what might go into that program and what informs it. Just 30 seconds on that one, and then we'll start ticking on. Okay, Andy, conscious of time, so just a very quick overview, stuff that's come through there for us.
There's a couple which have said what players need to develop or around players' needs, around philosophy for coaching and playing, also the England DNA, which is good. Individual team development, more towards the individual. Development needs of the players again, so ability of the players. So there's a constant theme there based around what the players needs and what they can actually do.
Smashing. Okay, right, guys, before we start moving on to the slides and we'll work the way through, I really do want you, if you can, to check and challenge and ask questions. As I said, we might not necessarily have all the answers for you. There might be stuff that we cover. So it might be that Andy and Michael see within the chat function some questions that they think we're not going to go into those right now because we're going to be covering that later on in the presentation. And hopefully what you'll see is that everything will be pieced together. But really do try and use that where you can. Ask questions, check and challenge, call us out and share your own knowledge and experience as well. As I say, that's really important. Okay, so just a bit of an overview. Some of you that are on have maybe never heard of coaching programs before or never considered doing it. What is a coaching program? You might have heard the same kind of terminology, but coaching program is the same as a syllabus. It's the same as a curriculum. So it could be a coaching program, coaching syllabus, or coaching curriculum. And basically, it's about that long-term planning for your group, so your team and those individuals within that group. And it's very much a journey that you share as a coach with your players. Now, you all know as well as we do that there's nothing better than seeing a group of players or individually your players develop and improve over the course of the season because of the work and support that you've offered. So the journey, that coaching program, is very much about you, but really placing your players at the heart of it. So how you can help and support your players collectively and individually get better. Now, the coaching program, particularly what we're going to look at tonight, very much about the tech and tack. So the technical and tactical demands of the game on your players at an age-appropriate level, but also starting to consider a little bit of stuff around their holistic needs as players as well and how that might fit in as part of the jigsaw. So very much, as I say, a bit of a journey. You're mapping out where you're going to go with your players over the course of the season and how you can start to help and support them. Okay, few considerations. There are no right or wrong ways. Now, that's really, really important. When you're pulling your program together, there is no set rule to say you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. Okay, as I said earlier, it's very much about you trying to work out what your players need and how you can best help and support them as an individual player and person, but also as a collective group as well. So what might work for one group of players might not necessarily work for another group. Now, examples of that, if you look at the foundation phase, for example, 5 to 11 years. You look at youth development phase, which are the two phases we're looking at tonight, 12 to 16. Now, there's going to be a massive range in there, massive difference between a group of players and individuals of 12-year-old compared to 16 and 5 to 11. Now, I know there's a lot of people that break it down to 5 to 8 and 8 to 11s and 12 to 14 and 14 to 16. But even within that category, there's going to be a big range, a big difference in what your players can do and can't do and what they need help and support with and what they need challenging with. Likewise, you consider some of you on the programme tonight are working in academy football, some are working in grassroots. Again, very different in terms of where the players are at. But even if you really break it down to individual age groups and you say, look at an under 11s, you might have an under 11 age group of players in Gateshead, for example, and another group of under 11s in Darlington, and their needs and wants as players individually and collectively are going to be very, very different. So your coaching programme should not be prescriptive. It shouldn't be let's pull it off the internet or let's take what Rich has given us tonight and use it. It should be very much about you having some kind of pieces to start putting together to frame something that's going to be appropriate for your group of players. Okay, Andy, anything to add?
No.
No, lovely. Okay, still just on the consideration, so linked to the previous point, it's very much about their age and performance related needs. So again, just to reinforce, you might have a group of players, 11-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever it may be, but you've got to look at their performance needs as well. Where are they at as a group? Where are they at individually? And how can you provide a real programme of development for them that includes the tech and tack, but it also includes all the holistic stuff as well to help and support them, both as people, but also as players. Now, the next point down you'll see is broken into 3 little areas, and this is something that I try to work from. We've already mentioned about trying to place your players at the heart of the process. The way I look at this is in the 3 different categories around refining, broadening, and challenging both their learning and application. Now, there's obviously a difference between learning and application anyway, because what your players maybe know doesn't mean they can necessarily do. And equally, what your players can sometimes do doesn't necessarily mean they can articulate why they've done it or how they've done it. If we can get both of those married together, great. Now, in terms of the refining, what I don't want you to think is, right, I've got a group of players of whatever age and they're really good at, let's say, just staying on the ball, so dribbling, mastering the ball, and we suddenly go, well, they're good at that, so we're not going to go and cover that over the course of this season. So it's very much about refining that and giving them more experience of being able to get on the ball, dribble, master, and so on based on their age and stage of development. Equally, it's then about broadening that experience, so giving them different scenarios to deal with. So is it in smaller spaces, bigger spaces, more pressure, less pressure, but giving them as wide of experience possible for them to go and work on that aspect that you're working on, in this instance, the dribbling part. And then on top of that, it's the challenging stuff. So you might have players that are really good at dribbling, but how are you going to challenge them even further? So we don't just suddenly say, right, they can do this, let's move on to something different over the course of a season or within your blocks of learning. It's about how can we continue to challenge? So how can we refine the learning and application, broaden it and challenge it? And that might be different, again, if you look at the differentiation model around different from player to player. So I might have a player in my group where I just need to refine what they've got. I might have a player in my group where I need to broaden it. I might have a player in my group where I need to challenge. And then the other obvious one as well is about supporting your players, which probably links more to the refining side of things. Point below that, programme should be very much an organic programme and evolve over the course of the season. So by that, what I mean is we don't necessarily have a programme in place and we say it's rigid and we stick to it. It's very much a case of things that'll happen over the course of the season where you go, you know what, we need to have a little look at this now, or we need to evolve what we're doing, we need to tweak things, we need to challenge more, we need to refine more, we need to support more, we might need to add a bit more of this in. So if someone mentioned earlier about I do 3 weeks on this before I move on, well, actually, I've done 3 weeks and I recognise my players might need another couple of weeks of this because they're not quite where we need to be at, or they might need a lot longer than that. So how can we then look to make that programme change and adapt and evolve over the course of the season? And very much linked to that is about don't fast track learning. So if you jump that back to the stuff around refining, broadening and challenging, there's no fast track to someone getting better at football, whether it be individually or collectively, in or out of possession, whether it be a technical component or principle of play. It's very much about how we can help and support them in the now but in that long-term development program, not about fast tracking to get them to be where they need to be in kind of 2 or 3 months' time. This is a long process over the course of a season, next season, and so on. So don't fast track it. Stay within the moment. Recognize when you need to refine, when you need to broaden, and when you need to challenge the learning. Andy, anything coming at the moment on the chat function?
Yeah. There's a good question here from Ray. He's got, should an individual player development be done and agreed with them and the parents before coaching program is planned?
Okay. Hold it, Ray. Great question. I'm not going to answer it. I will, but not right now. I'm going to answer it in a couple of slides' time, and you'll see how that comes out. Okay. But great question, but it will get covered, I promise. Okay. Something that might be a little bit different for some of you. We were speaking about this yesterday, myself and Andy and Mike, in the office about what we were going to offer and present to you today. And I was quite conscious of the fact that there's different levels of coaches on, and I don't want to blow too many people away, but equally I know we've got a lot of people with a lot of experience, so maybe wanted to give them something a little bit different as well. So periodization, if you haven't heard of it, periodization could be within regards to strength and conditioning and fitness, but it's also very much something around tactical periodization and stuff that you can link to technical periodization as well. And it's very much what we're looking at tonight, about building a coaching program over the course of a season, but then how you can start chunking things and putting things into blocks of work over the course of a season where you think they fit to best help your players. And again, if we go right back to one of the first slides, there's no necessarily right way or wrong way of doing this. It's just about recognizing what your players need and how you're going to help them. But your periodization is about a program over the course of a season, which is your macro cycle, if you look at that first bullet point, which is about supporting their long-term planning to help your players in the long term. So you're giving them a bit of a roadmap from the start of the season to the end of the season. This is the journey we're going to try and take you on. For me as a coach, for you as a group of players, and for the individuals within that, and this is how we're going to get there. Your mesocycle then, somebody mentioned earlier about working in blocks of 3 weeks. Your mesocycle could be 3 weeks, it could be 6 weeks. You could potentially argue that it could go up to maybe 10 or 12 weeks if you really wanted. But again, it's just recognizing the needs of your players and what it is you're working on and how you decide to devise this. So again, no right or wrong way. Do you decide that over the course of a season, you're going to chunk things into blocks of 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks? You could even argue that you go, right, my first mesocycle is going to be a 6-week block on this, but then I'm going to go and do my next mesocycle, so my short-term block, for 3 weeks, and then my next block might be 8 weeks. So there's nothing again to say it has to be 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, or 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. It can be blocked as you see appropriate for your group of players. But that mesocycle, those different blocks will start to form the season that you've got in place. Okay, the time that you've got available with your players. And then your microcycle is your weekly sessions and game plan linked into that, so your match days. So linking your training and match days together. Now, some of you, again, might be based in academy football or elite female football, or again in grassroots football. You might train twice a week. You might train twice a week for 2 hours. You might train 3 times a week. If you're in grassroots football, you still might train twice a week. You might have a week of training. But when you add in the game time into that as well, you would ordinarily have at least 2 hours with your players, but potentially up to 5, 6, 7 hours, depending upon where you're working and who you're working with. So your microcycle would form the weekly sessions and practices that go into that to link back into your mesocycle, to link back into your macrocycle. So small chunks, weekly blocks, into a big block of delivery that then fits into the course of the season. And you'll see a couple of diagrams that I'm going to present to you shortly, which will hopefully bring that to life. Okay, but your microcycles, if your mesocycle is 6 weeks, so that block of work is 6 weeks, your microcycle, your weekly sessions, would be 6 weeks of work linking into that program. Whether that's 1 or 2 sessions a week, you're working on the same thing. So rather than jumping and saying, we're going to work on counter-attacking tonight, and then next week we're going to work on finishing in the attacking third, and the next week we're going to work on defending with a mid-block, or strip it back to foundation phase and go, we're working on attacking 1v1 tonight, then we're working on receiving to play forwards, and then the next week we're working on forward passing. You're trying to chunk things if you can to reinforce learning and give your players lots of opportunities to work on that given aspect of the game that you've decided to go with. Okay, now this might, it might blow your eyes for starters with the yellow and grey, but hopefully it starts to bring things to life a little bit. Just give you 30 seconds or so just to kind of catch your eye, and then I'll give you a little bit of detail around it. Okay, so this is something, not in terms of the stuff that necessarily fits in there, in terms of the different cycles and the blocks of delivery, but in terms of how I've presented it, this is something that I've come with to try, if I can, for you to visualize kind of how this looks, and there'll be another slide that breaks it down even further. Now, Ray asked a really good question about engaging with your players and your parents. Massively important. So if you just look in the outer yellow box at the moment, if you've been on a current FA course, whether it be level 1, level 2, UEFA B or even A license, there'll be a lot of stuff around the England DNA and stuff around how we play and your playing philosophy. Now, my personal opinions are you can't really start to form a coaching program for the course of a season with your players, regardless of whether they're 6-year-old or whether they're 16-year-old or 36-year-old, if you don't have that philosophy in place. So how you want your group of players to play as a collective group, but then hammering it right down to the foundation phase about the real fundamentals of what your players need, so that real technical base that Graham spoke about on the last webinar. So ensuring that your players can master the body, they can master the ball, and they can master the game. So it would link all the way through how we play in the playing philosophy for your players, again, individually and collectively. What does that look like for your age group, your age phase, your group of players, before you can then start forming that coaching program? Now, linking to that is about profiling your players. So by profiling your players, what we talk about is what can your players do technically and tactically, what can they do physically, psychologically and socially. So that goes to the right-hand lane that comes down around holistic development, which is about that four-corner long-term stuff. Now, for your younger players, you might be talking about them again with regards to staying on the ball, dribbling, shielding the ball, turning, 1v1 skills, maybe receiving the ball in tight areas. What can they do? What can't they do? Where do they need supporting? Where do they need challenging? For your older players, moving into the youth development phase and even the professional development phase, you might start looking at position-specific stuff. So what can my number 2 and 3 do? So my fullbacks or my wing backs, what can they do as part of our system? What are they good at? What do they need help with? What's my number 8 like? My box-to-box midfielder? What's my number 10 like? And again, what help can I offer them? And how does that profiling of your players fit within your playing philosophy and how we play to then go and form your coaching program? Now, again, to jump back to Ray's point around engaging, your playing philosophy, I would imagine, if you're part of a grassroots club, an academy system, or an elite female pathway program, will be driven by your club. And what we were speaking about yesterday, Andy came up with a great point, was around your team philosophy should really fit within your club philosophy. Otherwise, what we've got is we've got a massive club with lots of individual teams that fit within that. Now, my point then that me and Andy started talking about was your club might have that in place, which informs your team philosophy, but you as a coach need to play your role in that. Because if you feel that there's something missing within your philosophy or something that you might not necessarily agree with, I personally believe it's your duty to then go and speak to the powers that be within your club to try and inform what that might look like in terms of that philosophy also being quite organic and how that might need to evolve over the course of time based on current trends, the development of players, the players you've got within your club, and what the game starts to look like moving forwards. And then on top of that, it's very much about engaging with your players and your parents. Players fundamentally need to know what they're working on. What program have we got in place to help and support you? Particularly, I think when they start asking questions is when they start getting older. So what are we going to do as coaches to help you as players? Well, here we go. We've got this program in place. We're looking at chunking it like this, and this is how we're going to support you. But then when you're working with younger players, Ray's right with what he's saying, engaging with your parents, letting your parents know what you're going to be doing with your players over the course of the season to help them as a player, as a person, in possession, out of possession, during the moments of transition, and the stuff around goalkeeping as well. Okay, so very much about you, the club, the team, your players, but also engaging with your parents. Andy, anything to add from yourself?
There's a few good questions coming through here. There's a one from Paul Robinson. How do you prevent a 6-week or more mesocycle on one topic with 2 sessions a week becoming repetitive? Now, for me, again, this goes down to you as a coach and how you create, like how you're creative. If you do the same practice over and over again, then yeah, it's going to get repetitive. But if you design that practice so it takes many different forms, so whether then it goes into 1v1s or 2v2s or 2v1s or 3v2s, it's going to keep it engaged. It's going to keep them challenged. So again, that's going to be down to you as a coach to be creative. And also what's really important is how you review it afterwards to see, well, did it meet the players' needs? Were they bored? Were they engaged? So that's an answer for me, is around you and your creativity.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in on that one, Andy, brilliant response. And I think as well, Paul, just to go back to what we said, your cycle, that mesocycle might not necessarily have to be 6 weeks. So it might be that you programmed it for 3 weeks. You might have programmed it for 6 weeks. But again, my thoughts are, look at a coaching session. So if you break this right down and you go, I'm coaching a session, and coaches often, particularly when they're new to the game, will start putting, right, I'm going to work on this for 10 minutes. Well, actually, after 10 minutes, my players are flying. They're being challenged. They're engaged. And they're enjoying what they're doing. Well, after 10 minutes, I'm not going to stop that now. We're going to go with what's happening in front of us. But I've said 10 minutes, and actually after 5 minutes, this is falling to pieces. So I need to react to that as a coach and think about how I can now adapt and change. Same in a way with that mesocycle, that if you're 3 weeks in, but you've planned 6 weeks, and you go, you know what, actually, we've nailed this. So we are where we need to be, particularly, I think, youth development phase. So if you've done, let's just say, for example, you've done 3 weeks on winning the ball back high or pressing high, whatever you want to call it. And actually the players are really starting to get it, or your players are maybe starting to disengage with that a little bit and they need a bit of something else. That's when you might go, well, actually that cycle that I've got in place that was going to be 6 weeks, we might have nailed it in 4 weeks. So we might need to adapt and evolve that ourselves and go, right, we're now on to the next bit. So I think, as Andy said, it's very much about being creative and going with the flow a little bit, yourself and your players. Andy, next one.
Yeah, we've got one from Ben Wilkie as well. Is how would you have a measurable target that players should be aiming to meet at the end of the foundation phase, for example?
So you were breaking up a little bit on that one, Andy. Sorry. What? Say that again. Sorry.
Well, Ben Wilkie's got, would you have a measurable target that players should be aiming to meet at, say, the end of the foundation phase?
No, I don't think so, Ben, because I think it goes back to the point that we raised earlier, really, about every player being different. You know, what are the players' start points? So am I a player that comes in at 10-year-old and I'm brand new to football, but I'm expected to maybe hit the same target by the end of foundation phase at 11, when actually I'm going with another player who's been playing since the 5-year-old? For me, the phases overlap anyway, because you don't suddenly get to the end of foundation phase at 11-year-old and go, right, I'm now ready for youth development phase. In the foundation phase, we're setting them up for the next steps, but a lot of stuff will cross over. So a lot of the stuff that you're working on within that upper end of foundation phase should start filtering into the youth development phase, and vice versa. That if some of the stuff you might think, well, actually, this is youth development phase stuff, well, actually, my players can cope with this in the foundation phase, dependent upon the players. So yeah, you might have stuff in place. You might start to informally, I suppose, kind of assess where your players are at and what they can do and what they can't do. And your kind of role as a coach is to kind of help them get better. So whatever their start point is and whatever they can do or can't do, it's helping them get better at the stuff they can do and helping them get better at the stuff that they can't do. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily a target that we have to say, this is where we need to get to. And if we're not there, what we're going to do? Are we going to then try and cram a bit more stuff in, or do we just go with the flow a bit? And my personal thoughts are, particularly in the foundation phase, targets are on kids' heads all the time. They're at school, they're doing SATs in year 2, they're doing SATs at year 6. Actually, football's something that, yeah, we're there to help them get better. And we, in our own mind, probably need a bit of a framework in our own mind in terms of where we want to go, which is what this program's probably about. But without slapping targets on players to say they need to have accomplished this by this point, it's very much about, let's just help them get better, let them enjoy the game, let them get better, help them get better, and have an understanding of what start points and end points look like for different players within that age phase. Andy?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And it's when you're measuring players, it becomes very, very subjective. You as coaches know your players, you know what they're capable of now, and you'll know what improvement they've made. So for me, that's probably a measurable target to see that improvement. When I was with the Centre of Excellence down Teesside, I created a coaching syllabus for the coaches to work through the phases, and I put the trust in the coaches. There were UEFA B level 2 coaches. If they were meeting what the syllabus was for their age group or age band, I trusted their judgment. That's the only thing we'd go off. Obviously, I would have my own views based on how they were playing, but it's difficult. It's a difficult one to measure. So just go off your own instinct on the development that you see within them.
Yeah, and I think linked to that, what Andy's just mentioned about the syllabus that was in place, which links to this. Obviously, we said at the beginning, coaching program syllabus, curriculum, they'll be different as well. So if people do have them in place in grassroots, again, what one club's come up with in, an under 11s group at one club will look different to what it looks like in another club. And again, that's probably the same in academy football. So for me, it's a journey. The players are on a journey. Yeah, we might have stuff in mind in terms of where they're at and where they need to get to and how we're going to help them get better. But it needs to be, again, using the word, it needs to be quite organic and flexible, and recognising, we're on a journey. And what we said earlier, we're not fast tracking stuff. We're just helping them fall in love with the game, but getting better at the game week on week and month on month. And what that looks like from one individual to another will be very different. Okay, so just moving on in terms of this diagram as well. So you've got your outer layer, which is around your playing philosophy. Your next layer that we come to is basically now, once we've got that philosophy in place, we can start looking at what the program looks like. So again, just to reinforce that season-long coaching program, and don't get caught up with these words, by the way, but that is your macro cycle. So for over the course of the season, next layer that comes in, and it'll be clear on the next one, is around your blocks of delivery. And again, is that 3 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? And then your coaching session, and then your practices that make up the coaching sessions. But again, I think that'll become a little bit clearer when I show you on the next slide here now. So what we have here, your big, or the big that should be on your screen now, the big circle that says coaching program that looks a little bit like a clock face, that is your kind of yearly program for the season. So over the course of a season or a year, whether you train for 12 months solid or whether you go 10 months, that is the program that you're putting in place for your players. You're then looking at how you break it down with the little yellow slice that's been pulled out into your blocks of delivery. Okay, now again, just to reinforce on this example here, you will see that there are 6 different blocks of delivery. That could be more, that could be less. Okay, equally to the right hand side of that little slice, you'll see that there are 6 little circles which illustrates the different sessions that make up that block of delivery. Again, that could be different. Okay, so you could have 4 sessions within that block. Okay, it could be 8 sessions within that block. So the number of blocks of delivery that you have within your program will vary from club to club, team to team, and coach to coach. And the number of sessions that make up the block of delivery will also vary. So you could have 8 blocks of delivery, and there might be 8 sessions within each block. You might have 6 blocks of delivery, and there might be 4 sessions that make up, or there might be a bit of a mix. So you might have 6 blocks of delivery, and as we said earlier, there's 4 sessions that make up the first block, but then there's 8 sessions that make up the next block, and you have to understand why you're doing that. So why am I focusing more on this work, this part of the game, than what I am this part of the game? Okay, but again, that's understanding of your players and understanding of your group. The next one you'll see in the top right hand corner is just the practices, which in this example has been split into 4 sections. Now, if you were present with Graham's webinar a couple of weeks ago, looking at breaking down kind of practice design and planning, Graham will have spoke about the different practices or the different templates or ways you go about putting your sessions together. So you might argue that you go in and you go, you know what, tonight we're working in a 7v7 game or a 4v4 game, and that's what we're doing all night. So my 1 hour session is made up by 1 practice or 1 game. Okay, but equally you might go in and go, session 1 of this block of delivery, I'm going to work on this, and these are my 3 different practices that are going to make up this session, but they're all going to focus on the same aspect of the game. So I'm not going to go in and work on dribbling in tight spaces, and then my first part of my practice, my arrival activity on my warm-up, is around passing. So the first part of my practice is still going to be very much around dribbling in tight spaces, but it might then build into the next bit. So there might be a bit of a leading practice that then goes into I don't know, some sort of kind of organised chaos practice where loads of players individually with balls, lots of defenders trying to get from one zone to another. And then you might put them into a small-sided game where there's a real focus on dribbling. Again, it might be go youth development. You might do a leading practice again, but then you might go into a phase of play. So you've got two different practices that again focus on the same thing. So it might be regaining and countering from the midfield third, but the two practices link together. So a lead in into a phase of play, or I might go whole part whole, or I might have a carousel approach to practice design, but there's a real focus on the same aspect of the game that makes up and builds that session that fits within the block of delivery. So you've got, just to go over that again, you've got your coaching program over the course of the season, which is your big circle there. Pull out your block, the little slice, and how many sessions make up that particular block of delivery, and then what does each individual practice, weekly session, look like with regards to number of practices that make that up. Andy, anything coming at this moment? Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, we've got one here from Mark Bruce. It's got, if you had a yearly plan set out and doing, say, 6 weeks per topic, during the season you see something that is becoming a problem, do you pause the plan and work on this problem or stick to your plan? For me, it's, well,
don't answer it
once.
Sorry, okay. Don't answer it. Sorry, mate, don't answer it. It's coming. Was it Mark, did you say?
Yes, it's Mark Bruce.
Mark. Great question, Mark. I'm not answering it, and neither's Andy. I'll let him have his moment in the sun in a minute, but it's coming up on a slide in a moment, and it'll make it a little bit clearer, I think, hopefully. Okay, so next one from me, and then Andy's going to pose a few questions at you to get you thinking and putting some stuff in the chat function again. Most of you, in fact, I'm hoping all of you, because you've been through the coaching pathway at various levels, are obviously familiar with the holistic development model, the long-term stuff around your 4 corners. This is me just presenting it in a slightly different way based on this long-term coaching program. So rather than it being your traditional 4 corners with your tech and tack in one corner, social, psych and physical, for this instance, I've placed the tech and tack at the centre of this, at the heart of this, because we're looking at a coaching program where we're building something over the course of the season, where we're looking at football or player development in possession, out of possession, and those moments of transition through the age phases over the course of a season. So the tech and tack becomes really important as part of this program of development that we're putting in place for our players. However, how you then start to add in the other bits and pieces around how you can support your players physically, psychologically and socially would be down to you. Now, it might be that you can fit some of that stuff into your coaching program at the start of the season. So as a perfect example, foundation phase, your players should get lots of opportunities to work on the ABCs. So agility, balance, coordination and speed. So then how do you start mapping that into the coaching program over the course of the season? Do you afford 15 minutes at the start of every session to do some movement-based work, little games of tag, etc., to really work and stress those ABCs? Do you look to do it every other week? Do you look to afford half an hour if you're training for longer? Again, if you're in an academy and you're training for a longer period of time with your young players, you might be able to afford an hour to do that, depending upon how much you've got with your players. But not missing out the stuff that's really important. Again, to reiterate, what I was saying about mastering your body before you master the ball. With your maybe professional development phase, so teams maybe going back into pre-season soon, your physical stuff might get loaded into your program at the start of the season and then embedded as you go. So how do you do some of your disguised running at the start of the season where you're getting the ball out still, you're doing loads of games, but you're going to start working your players a little bit more in the physical corner in terms of aerobic and anaerobic stuff to help and support them over the course of the season. So you might be able to embed some more of the 4 corner stuff into your coaching program, but some of the other stuff might be coming in as your program goes. So as your program does start to evolve, you might be able to add the little bits in. So Michael Bell, who's on the call, mentioned yesterday, great point. You might be foundation phase and 3 months into the season, you might have a new player come and join your group. So then what do you do from a social point of view at training to embed that player? Or you might have a player that over the course of the season loses confidence. So then how do you go and support that player in terms of their psychological confidence and anxiety or whatever it may be? So I think some of your psych and social stuff can be embedded at the start as part of your program, but it can also start to come in as we go over the course of the season, just as your physical can as well. But again, for me at the moment, in terms of devising this program, heavy focus on tech and tack, and then how we can start to bring some of the stuff in at the start or during the programme. Andy, any thoughts before I move on to yourself for this and have a little breather?
No.
No, lovely. Right, over to Andy, guys, for the next little slide.
Right, okay. Just to try and plant the seeding and provoke a bit of thought process, what I want you to think about is how you see the game being in 10 years from now. Look at it from tactically and technically, both in possession and out of possession. So what do you think the technical, tactical, physical requirements of an individual players will be, or even from a team as well? So in the chat, put your thoughts on how you see it being in the next 10 years from now. Right, okay, so we've got non-contact. All positions will be ball players with very good skills across every player. More emphasis on keeping control of the ball, so I think physically will decrease. Players being able to play comfortably in all positions. High press, increase the counter press, okay. See the in possession side being more and more about individual on the ball. Dan's got smaller sided games, 3v3, 2v2s, 1v1s, certainly from a youth perspective, potentially yet. Higher skill levels technically. Okay, some good points coming through there. Who thinks that we don't actually know how it's going to look? Because for me, looking at the game in 10 years' time, it could go anywhere. It's been physical, then it went small, then it went really technical. It's probably going to increase more technically. It's probably going to get quicker. So for us as coaches, how do we prepare our players for that? How do we give them the skills, or for want of a better term, and the lads will have a little chuckle here because I'm passionate about this, develop that toolbox. How many tools do you put in their toolbox as a child? So when they get to 18, 19, 20 and they're going to go into the senior game, are they prepared for it? Can they play in multiple positions? Are they comfortable on the ball? How many of you rotate your players? For that, I mean, if you've got you're doing under 7s, under 8s now, and your goalkeeper plays in goal for the next 4 years till they get to under 12s, what happens when they get to senior football? If they don't grow past 5'5", they're never going to be a goalkeeper. So the point I'm making there is can we develop our players to deal with whatever the future looks like? So going back to the points that Shuffs was mentioning earlier, developing the long term, so all the different cycles, you're exposing them to all those different skills, enhancing their strengths, working on their weaknesses. Now, Shuffs is going to go into a little bit more detail after this slide around the different practices and how cycles might look, and you'll see how it can be varied, whether it be 2v2s, 3v3s, whether it be individual work. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to pose one more thing with you to think about, to take away around how much time you actually have with your players. Okay, so some excellent points there, which is great. Shuffs, anything you want to add to that?
No, mate, no. Moving on, next slide, or? Yeah, cool. Right, guys, what I'm going to present to you over the next kind of 5 minutes or so are 2 different examples of a coaching program. First one I'm going to share with you now is foundation phase. Next one's going to be youth development phase. Now, a couple of things to stress at this point. This is very much an example. Okay, so I've not sat down with any massive thought around a group of players that I work with at the moment and go, right, I'm making this up for my players. This is just an example to show you a way of potentially working. And it's also worth noting that the stuff that I've put down is more for the upper end foundation phase. So rather than it being for your 5, 6 and 7s, this one's looking more at kind of your 8 to 11. But again, recognising there's a bit of a difference. Now, there's a question at the bottom which as I go through this, you might want to start considering, regardless of whether you work with foundation phase players or not, but what it might look like for you and your players working within that kind of age group. So if you're working with 5-year-olds, what might it look like? How might you adapt and change this? If you're working with 11-year-olds in academy football, elite female pathway, grassroots football, whatever it may be, what does it look like for them as well? So the example, again, just to bring to life the one from earlier, so where I showed you the blank template, I think there were 6 different blocks of learning, those mesocycles as part of that full program. So in this example that I'm sharing here, there are 8 different blocks of learning, but you'll see that when I pull the attacking 1v1 out, there are just 4 different sessions to work on. Now, this isn't me saying do 4 weeks on 1v1. Okay, this is just an example. So you might go, you know what, with the 1v1 stuff, my personal thoughts on 1v1s and 2v1s and 2v2s in the foundation phase, massively important because you're still going to get loads of engagement with the ball, but you're going to get contact with players and you're going to get contact with real competition and decision making and problem solving, etc. All the stuff that we really stress, but whilst ensuring that they're really building that technical base as well. So the kind of examples that I've gone with here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just go through, let's just go the grey ones, for example. So first block, I've gone dribbling, ball manipulation, turning and shielding. So basically the whole stuff around England DNA, around mastering the ball and staying on the ball and how you can be clever, creative, exciting, dealing with the ball under varying degrees of pressure and so on. Then got the 1v1 stuff. So attacking 1v1, which might be, again, in fact, I'll come back to that because I've got the 4 examples. We've then got winning the ball back early. So is it right and proper for you to do some defending stuff with your players in that age group that you're working and looking at different ways and maybe individually or in combination, trying to win the ball back as quickly as they can and really enjoy winning the ball back, but then having a goal. So once I've won it back, I'm now in possession. So can I go and do something with it? And then another one around creating and scoring as well. Obviously, there's the ones in yellow. So that's not covered everything. There'll be things in there that you look at and go, well, I wouldn't do that with my players in the foundation phase. And if we were able to talk about it now, I'd probably agree with you. There'll be stuff in there that you go, he's not put that in. Again, I've not put everything in. I've just put a few different examples in for you to consider. So just a real example of some of the things that I would consider working on if I was working with players aged 8 to 11 in that kind of foundation phase. So pull out the attacking 1v1. I've then decided to go on this example with 4 different sessions. Again, it could be 3, it could be 6, it could be 10, very much again based on your players, their needs and wants. And if you can't read this, because I appreciate this is a bit smaller, the 4 examples I've come up with is first one's around kind of trying to off balance your opponent. So changes of direction, dealing with the ball in those tight spaces and a little bit of stuff around disguise and surprise. Second one is one around the bigger spaces, so bigger distances, so more running with the ball and attacking at speed. So consideration around size of touch to get beyond players. Changes of speed again to go and surprise opponents, etc. Next one's around the 1v1, so safe side dribbling to protect and hide the ball. So how can I get past a player whilst protecting and shifting it and using my body? And then the last one is around that individual brilliance around I'm 1v1, but I'm trying to shift the ball to get myself in a position where I can get a shot away at goal. So just 4 different examples. But again, just take that last example there, 1v1, creating individual brilliance to get shots away at goal. You ain't going to master that in one session with your players. So we don't suddenly go, right, I've done a week on that, I've done that. That might be where you go, well, I've done that on a Tuesday night. I might set it up again on a Thursday night, particularly if the players have enjoyed it. And I might do exactly the same thing with them. Or I've worked on it on Tuesday. On Thursday, we're going to work on the same thing. And I've got a lot of my coaching detail in place, but we're going to do it in a different practice. So a lot of this stuff, it's like doing your times table at school. You're not going to nail it straight away. So whilst there's 4 examples, do I go with 4 and do I repeat them twice? Do I go with 6? Do I come back to attacking 1v1? So actually I've gone at the start of the season and I've done 6 weeks, but 2-3 months down the line, do I go and do another 6 weeks on attacking 1v1? So this is where we're just really trying to get you thinking and providing a bit of debate and questioning yourself and questioning us, I suppose, as well, around the makeup of what it looks like for your players. Again, just reinforcing no right or wrong way. And again, just the same example as earlier, the practices that make that up might look different for session to session. So in week 1, I might go with loads and loads of 1v1s in one practice, and we get lots of repetition of that. But week 2, I've come up with a few different practices that link to changing speed in big areas. So we move the players from one to another, but where there's a real seamless link between the two and we're not breaking it and changing it. Okay. So I don't know if you've been kind of engaging. Has anyone put any stuff in there, Andy, about what it might look like with their players?
Yeah, well, there's a good question come through. It's from Paul Robinson. He's got, how do you prepare players for the future training sessions? Hold on, another question's come in there. Sorry, how do you prepare players for future when training sessions don't match the realities of match day? Statistics show that training isn't physically or mentally demanding as a game. What's the best way to challenge your players? For me, a term I used to use was you play to train, you train to play. It shouldn't be any different. And if you get the tempo and intensity right in terms of the challenges you set, then it will mirror there or thereabouts what you want to get on a match day. Now, if you as a coach work ball each all the time and they're never in 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, then you're never going to recreate that, which is why you need to spend time and do a lot of game-based work as well as the individual technique work as well. So it's getting that balance. But I can't stress enough, and I've used it for a lot of years now, you play to train, you train to play. But you as a coach, you set that with the challenge and the environment which you give the players. That's the only way which I see it working, and I've experienced it. It doesn't mirror it exactly, but it gets it there or thereabouts.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I'm not going to add any more. The only thing I'll add is consider a slight difference in foundation phase. So 100% agree with Andy. I'm exactly the same in terms of my approach, particularly with those older players. With your younger players, still links to Andy's point about your challenging and engaging practices that you need to put on for your players so that actually they do physically, mentally and technically engage with your practice all the way through. I don't know where you got the stats from, Paul. If you have got it, I wouldn't mind just sharing it, to be fair, via email, because I'd be quite interested in that, because my experience, particularly if you look towards the professional game, and some of you might smile here, but I'm a Sheffield United fan. Chris Wilder, you've probably heard me talk about him loads, or should I call him Sir Chris Wilder, spoke about after lockdown, a couple of key players being injured. And he said that's because of the intensity that they train at, and they train at a greater intensity or a very similar intensity where it's full throttle, it's tackles going in, it's blocks going in, it's bodies on the line, that they train. So when they come to the game, exactly what Andy said there, the game feels the same as training. But you have then got to strip that back to go, well, foundation phase might look a little bit different, but the challenge and engagement still has to be there for them. Any other questions, Andy? You said another one had popped in.
No, it was basically Clark. He was responding to Paul's question originally. Okay,
nice one. Cheers, Clarky. Cool. So, example, and I've tried again, and I'll just reinforce, it's an example. It is not the only way of doing it. It's an example, and I've tried to think a little bit differently with this to give you something a little bit different maybe to think about. Again, I've gone 14 to 16. So again, if you're now looking at this and you work in the youth development phase, what does this look like for your players in the youth development phase if they're 12-year-old? Because it might look different to this. So again, don't think, oh, Richard's put this on, so I'm going to go and use it. Is it right for your players? It's just a different way of thinking. So again, what I've done here, I've broken this into 6 blocks. So where if I go back one, foundation phase 1, I've shifted it into 8 blocks of learning, those mesocycles. The mesocycles or blocks of delivery here are in 6 blocks. Focus around individual, unit and team, as I've highlighted at the top of the circle there. And what I've done is I've broken it into in and out through the 3 different areas of the pitch. So my first 2 blocks, I've gone out of possession and then in possession within the attacking third, and obviously to include your transition. Then I've gone out and in the midfield third, and then I've gone out and in the defensive third. Now, again, this isn't necessarily the right way of doing it. It's just a different way to get you thinking, because there might be people that are sat there now thinking, well, if I was working with my players, if I was going to do something in possession, I might work at the bottom end of the pitch. So I might go, you know what, we're going to work in the defensive third and we're going to work on how we play out first from the goalkeeper before we look at playing through and before we look at then finishing. So that build, create and finish the attack stuff. So I've just thrown this out in a different way and gone, okay, well, I put it in this one now where we've gone out of possession in the attacking third and then in possession. You could argue that you might go out of possession first in the attacking third, but my in possession slot is looking at the defensive third first. So you go in front to back when you're looking at out of possession, but you go in back to front when you're looking at in possession. Equally, me and Andy spoke about this yesterday, and anyone who's been on the UEFA B course with myself and Graham over the past couple of years have looked at how we can maybe work with two coaches at a time. So somebody takes the lead on a session and works with a group, whilst the other coach is managing the other team or maybe working with the other team. So as an example, I might be working with a team on pressing high to regain possession. And then if I was working with Graham, he might be working on or supporting the team on playing out from the back. So you start to get a bit of best of both worlds, where you're getting a little bit of the in and the out within the same third of the pitch, but how that also links to the next third of the pitch and so on. So again, just a different way of thinking, put it into those little blocks of in and out in the thirds. And then again, if you can see how I've pulled out the in possession in the attacking third, I've then broken it down into 4 different areas again. Those 4 areas, once again, to reinforce, could be 6 practices or 6 sessions, sorry, could be 3, could be 8. It's up to you how you decide to mould this for your players. And again, if you can't read it, just to go through. So I've gone creating and scoring from central areas. So how do you play through that zone 14 and get in and through to get shots off a goal? And creating and scoring from wide areas, whether it be the inside or outside channel, and then the influence and impact of players in the 18-yard box. Then the stuff around finishing in and around the box, and then linking that one step further around kind of first time finishing, and that stuff around kind of improvisation and creativity and recognition that around about, give or take, 90% of goals are scored first time. So that first time finish thing might link all the way through those practices. So we might be doing creating and scoring from central areas, but putting some constraints on your practice around how you get a first time finish away at goal and so on. Okay, so different chunks of work, different blocks of work, different way of looking at it, different way of thinking. It ain't the right way necessarily, or it's not the only way, should I say. For me and my players, it might be the right way. For you and your players, it might not be. Okay, so again, 6 sessions, 6 blocks, sorry, pull it out, 4 sessions, and the practices that make up each individual session. Andy, anything from yourself, mate?
Yeah, it's just one thing I would probably mention is to err on, just err on the side of caution. If there is 2 coaches, one's working attacking, one's working defending, and it's still important to make sure that you get a good flow of play and that it doesn't end up being a game of chess. Like the attacking coach steps in, then 30 seconds later the defensive coach steps in, and then vice versa. It's making sure that you choose your interventions very, very carefully and probably plan it together first of all, so you've got a good idea of who's working on what, so you can recognise when to step in, when not to step in, or choose a drinks break to make it if ball goes out of play. So it's just play on the side of caution. That's all it is with that, really. Ray has come in with a question here. Would you share this?
Sorry, can I jump in just while we're in the moment of that? Just to stress on that, and again, Graham might be putting this in the chat function, I can't see, and people on the UEFA B will get this. When we speak about those 2 coaches working together, it's very much been about, so if me and Andy were now delivering, I'm leading the session. So I'm working on that winning the ball back high up the pitch, but Graham would be managing the opposition. So he might be offering coaching moments, but it would be more maybe individual little flyby stuff, or it might be that when I get my group in to have a look around the tactics board, Graham gets his in, but Graham probably wouldn't start stopping his group of players and coaching unless, as Brownie's mentioned there, we maybe look towards a blended practice where we've planned it and mapped it and we know when each one's going to kind of intervene. But the focus would be on the lead coach with that group of players. So working on winning the ball high, but we need to manage the opposition, because if we don't manage the opposition appropriately, we then don't get the appropriate challenge for the team that I'm working with, if that makes sense. But people that have done the UEFA B will get that, they'll know that. Anybody who's not, if you do move on at any point in your kind of coaching pathway, you'd probably come into some of that content as well. Sorry, Andy, you said there was a question from somebody?
Yeah, Ray Fuller's come in with, would you share this with the parents and the players, depending on what age group you're working with? For me, yeah, I'd get the parents on board to some extent. Again, I did it at the Centre of Excellence. I found when I first went, I was fielding a lot of parents' meetings because parents didn't know what coaches were working with. What they were working with the kids would get in the car, and then the parents were saying one thing, the coach was saying another thing. So for me, if you can get the parents on side, great. Maybe just have them in earshot when you're doing any team talks. you're more likely then to have a consistent message in the car on the way home. The parents is what they're getting from yourself. But to what level of detail you go into, that's obviously going to depend on you. But I would certainly share some of it with them and get them on board if you can.
Cool. Next one here. Lovely. Right, okay. This slide created a little bit of debate between me and Andy yesterday in the office. I won't tell you who had, what opinion and what the debate kind of looked like, but it links very much. I think it was Mark who posed the question about, if you're in the season, do you move on to something else? If you've kind of recognised there's something that your players are struggling with, what I put there, I suppose, is do you go off script a little bit? Now, again, my personal thoughts are there's no right or wrong way. It's about what's right for your players. It's a different way of working. My thoughts are that a lot of coaches, when they come to deliver these coaching programs, like plan them, map them out and deliver them, my personal thoughts and experiences from seeing people do it or clubs doing it is they go, right, we'll work in block 1 for however long we've decided that is. We're then into block 2, we're then into block 3, we're then 4, we're then 5, we're then 6. My question to kind of get people thinking, and it was my thought to Andy yesterday, well, why do we do that? Why do we suddenly go, well, block 1 now is what we're working on, and then all of a sudden I'm moving to block 2, when actually some of the stuff that I've marked out and mapped out and planned in block 5 might at this moment in time be more appropriate, potentially. So there might be an argument to say you've mapped it out, it's methodical, you're going to go with it, so there's a real structure and one links to the next and the next and the next and so on. But there could be an argument where you go, you know what, we might need to go off script a little bit. Now, what I wouldn't want to do is be really random and go, I'm working on block 1 and I've done 6 weeks and now I'm going to go to block 5 and do a week on something because I'm reacting to something, which we'll come to in the next slide about reactionary coaching. And then I'll go back to block 1 or block 2. My personal way of working would always be I'm doing a block of work. But if I decide that I've done block 1 and then I'm thinking I might want to go to block 4 now because for whatever reason I feel that's now needed for the players, the group, the individuals, then I don't really see any reason why you couldn't do that. Another debate was, if I just go back one, and I was saying to Andy yesterday, if you look, for example, around, I'm trying to point in, you obviously can't see, out of possession in the defensive third, we might be doing something on defending with a deep block to counter-attack. And then I said to Andy, well, we get to that point in the season, and actually my team, for whatever reason, through a byproduct of some other stuff or just within the games naturally, we've actually got a real good defensive shape when we're defending deep, and we're coming up with a real good deep block. But what we're not actually doing is we're not actually countering very well. So I might then go, well, actually, why would I now go and spend the 3 weeks I'd planned on doing stuff around defending deep, in wide areas, central areas, wherever that may be, and defending with a deep block, when we're doing that pretty well? Do I not then go, well, actually, we've nailed that pretty much. I might have to reinforce a bit. But do we now look at actually going, well, you know what, it's that moment of transition, or when we get in possession where things are starting to break down because the first pass out's not good enough. So we need to then consider, well, we've got the defensive part, the structure, the shape, but the next bit's not working. So do I go and spend 3-6 weeks on that when actually I might move one forwards a little bit? But what I wouldn't want to do, and what I wouldn't want you guys to do, is just go boom, boom, scattergun and go, right, I'm going from there to there and there to there to there. I'm still having a bit of structure and there's still very much a thought process, but I'm starting to look at what my programme looks like. I've mapped it out at the start of the season. I still want to offer all of these chunks of work because it's what my players need, but I might just need to move it around a little bit rather than going in this order that I've put at the start of the season that my assistant coach might not have agreed with anyway. Or somebody on this webinar might be looking and going, well, the one here that Rich has put, as I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't start with that. I'd start with that. Okay, great. There's always going to be an argument for that. No problem at all. So it's the same when it comes to this. Do we go round 1 to 2 to 3? Or do I go 1, 2, 3? Oh, you know what? I need to go to 5 now because that's what my players need. So I don't know. Any thoughts coming in via the chat function, Brownie? Just something to get everyone considering and thinking.
No, I mean, something for me, it links back to what Graham delivered a couple of weeks back. For newer coaches, maybe it's not as experienced coaches, working in the methodical order may be beneficial for you and give you that sort of structure. Then the more knowledgeable you become, experienced you become, you can do what Chuffs is saying, and then maybe recognise earlier that I need to do block 5 before I do block 2. It's around you as a coach and where you feel you are. And Chuffs is spot on when he says is try not to be like working a scattergun approach. So if you think back to attacking principles generally, creating space is one of the fundamental in one of the first key factors you do. But if your team's really good at getting into spaces nice and early, you maybe still need to work on it. So then you might start going on their own selection of pass, decision who you're going to pass to, the weight of pass. Then you might focus on that instead. So that then becomes your block 1. Creating space might become your block 6, or you might bring that further down depending on how you see your program going. So, but if you're new and you're inexperienced, then working in methodical order will certainly help you. But it all depends on you as a coach. So that's the only thing I would say to that, really.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said, guys. We or I or me and Andy don't have all the answers. As such, football in general, everyone don't have the same answer and opinions. This is hopefully just starting to provoke a little bit of thought and getting you thinking a little bit different and getting you thinking about what am I currently doing? Is it right for my players? Is it right for me? Could there be a better way of working? Do I challenge my own thinking? Have I always done it this way, but maybe I need to think about it this way? And as as I said right at the very start, there is no right or wrong way. It's about recognising what is right for your players, but it's about having a process in place, a structure in place to ensure that we're not just going random and going, bang, I'm going to do this tonight, and then next week I'm going to do this. It's about how you can best support your players' long-term development journey, regardless of whether they're 5-year-old or whether they're 25-year-old. How can you best help your players? So again, as I say, hopefully just starting to provoke a little bit of thought and getting you questioning things and challenging your own thinking and maybe challenging some of the things that we're presenting to you as well. Okay. Andy, am I still there?
You are, sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
For some reason, no, there you go. Apologies, everybody. My slide wasn't moving on. I thought I'd been cut off by the internet. Right, okay. Coming up to the last kind of couple of slides, we've got about 20 minutes left, and we just want to kind of engage you guys as well a little bit towards the end. So, model that, again, I'm putting here to you. You might have seen things maybe in different formats. I don't know. This is something that I've just kind of pulled together again over the past couple of weeks when we've been pulling this presentation together. And it very much it's just highlighting the stuff around your players individually, but your players collectively as a group as well. So how you can try where you can to marry the two together, but also recognizing that what you're putting on for a collective group might not always meet the needs of any particular individual. And it's always hard to do that anyway, because as you'll know, we're working in a team sport where you might have a group of 10, 15, 20 players, and to try and cater for all of their needs in any given session is nigh on impossible. But it's starting to have that thought process around how can I help them individually as part of this collective group while still offering that support for the group as well. So example may be that in the foundation phase, again, if we use the dribbling stuff and staying on the ball, mastering the ball, we're doing loads and loads of stuff around individual ball mastery, manipulation in different areas, different pressure. But I've got a couple of players that are absolutely outstanding and they're miles in front of the rest of the group. So do they need the same as what I'm offering the rest? But rather than changing the whole focus or putting something different on for them, do I still continue to work on dribbling in tight spaces, but we start adding some other bits in? So we might start adding in some stuff around support players, magic players, bounce players, whatever you want to call them in the foundation phase, where I might be one of those players who wants to work on more stuff around combination play, passing and receiving, still getting lots of dribbling in, but I might be a player that you're bouncing it to and I'm giving it you back. So all the other players are still getting loads of dribbling and some passing stuff, whereas I'm going to get more and more repetition of the passing stuff that I might need a bit more help with because I'm nailing the other stuff. So how can you start bringing in factors to help and support your players individually as part of that collective group? Again, I'm not going to go into these because the focus today has been around tech and tack, but also considering those aspects around physical, psych and social as well. If you're looking at youth development phase, I was saying to Andy and Michael either yesterday or earlier on today, I often think that one of the main, probably the most important part of the game is finishing, getting the ball in the back of the net, but can often be the most neglected part of the game, or maybe not part of the game that we do appropriately, i.e. passing the ball to a coach and getting a shot off when it's not realistic, it's not real, it's not relevant. But how can we start adding in more finishing stuff? So do we go, well, actually, we've got a programme of delivery again for our players in the youth development phase where we're working through in possession, out of possession, the defensive third, midfield third, attacking third. But actually, at the end of every session, we're going to spend 15 minutes on finishing if we're afforded the luxury of maybe having a longer session. So we might have an hour and a half. So we go an hour and 15 minutes, full makeup of what we're working on over this block of delivery. But the last 15 minutes, we're going to add a little bit more in. Or can we bring in some individual stuff for players? So what do players need? And Graham spoke about individual learning plans on the last one. How can we start adding some of that stuff in as well for players, whether it be during the session or maybe as a bolt on at the end? So it's very much looking at how we can blend these four corners together, real focus on the tech and tack as a player, how we support them as individuals, but then how we can really start looking at this and going, well, it's a team game. How are we helping and supporting the collective? But how do we start helping and supporting individual needs as part of that collective group as well? Andy, anything?
No.
Okay, lovely. Conscious of time, so I'm going to move on. A couple more slides from me, and then we'll open up for any more questions towards the end. Graham, when Graham presented the workshop around practice design and planning, on the very first slide, and I don't think we went into this in any detail, but he spoke about how a topic or a theme that you might decide to work upon in a training session might come from a coaching program. It might come from reactionary coaching. It might come from, I think, I can't remember what Graham called it now, but basically what I call future game coaching. And then there was some other stuff around modern trends or what you might see on TV, etc. So some other ways that people work, and right at the very beginning, Andy mentioned in the chat function that people spoke about reacting to stuff that had happened in a game. So they're working on that in training. So that is kind of your reactionary training. So it might be that in the foundation phase, you've gone, right, we've been looking at stuff and our players have, again, struggled to run with the ball today for whatever reason. When they've got the ball, they've had the space to do it, but they've really let themselves down or they've struggled with it. So we're now going to work on running with the ball at training, where actually you might look at it and go, you know what, they've been brilliant at running with the ball for the past 6 weeks or the past few games, or in training we've done it and they've been great. And actually within that session, or that game, sorry, they might not have been on it for whatever reason. Were they up against better players? Were they not in the mood? Whatever it may be, whatever factors might be taken on board. So do we suddenly then go, well, it's not quite looked right in the game, so we're now going to work on it in training? I think the example I used with regards to older age football, so the more senior football experience I had a couple of years ago was, and forgive me for going over this if you heard this on the last one, was about going up against a team that defended with a mid-block, and the team that I was working with really struggled to kind of play through them, around them, and maybe even beyond them or over them. So then we went, right, training on Wednesday, we're going to work on how we play through a mid-block. And then at the end of it, I started reflecting on the session and went, well, why have I done that? Because the team we're coming up against on the weekend don't play with a mid-block anyway. So in senior football, where the results stuff was a bit more driven than the development, it was probably wrong of me to go and do some stuff reacting to what had happened in a previous game, where if anything, I should have stuck to my coaching programme, or probably more positively should have looked towards a future game and how we could have set up to then go against the team that we were coming up, who may well have decided in the next game we're going to come and press you high. And then all of a sudden my players are going, all right, okay, we're now dealing with this, when actually Tuesday night and Thursday night we've been working on playing through a mid-block, but now we're coming up against a team that are going to press us and it looks very different. So your reactionary stuff, your future game coaching is about what I've just kind of mentioned there. We're coming up against a team that plays a certain way. So another example was coming up, a team we played against a couple of years ago played 3-4-3, in and out of possession, not played against it before as a team. So we did some stuff in the lead up to that game over the 2 or 3 sessions that we had around how we were going to play within our system in possession and out of possession against the 3-4-3. So planning for the next game, so deviated away a little bit from that coaching program. So that bottom bullet point you might see there is around, do we take a blended approach as well? So do we have a coaching program in place, but actually there might be times where we have to go towards the reactionary coaching, and that might be that we're seeing the same mistake as a collective group or individually happening over and over again, or we might decide to blend in a little bit of the future stuff. So we've got a coaching program in place, we're working through it to help and support the players, but actually we're now going, you know what, we're going to do this today because we're coming up against this opposition, and we want to see how we tactically work against that. So a question for you all now, just throw it out, 30 seconds. What age phase do you think is appropriate to go and do the reactionary and future game coaching? Foundation phase 5 to 11, youth development phase 12 to 16s, professional development phase 16 to 21, or open age adult football, whether that be male or female. What are your thoughts? What we getting, Andy?
A bit of a mixture. A lot of seeing like youth development upwards, 16s to 21s. As you said that, a few have said all. Depends on the ability of the group. All but younger age groups only if reacting to sustained things, not one-offs yet. All different extents. So more open age.
Cool.
Bit of a mixture, bit of a mixed bag there.
Yeah, I would, from a personal level, agree. I think for me, it'll be the reactionary and the future game stuff will be more top-end youth development phase into kind of professional development phase, open age football. So you kind of maybe 15 upwards. Foundation phase. Would I do future game coaching? No, personally, I wouldn't. Would I do reactionary coaching? 95% of me probably would say no. There'd be an element of me that maybe would say yes, but that would be based on that, and it would be based on the individual. So if, for example, I've got Andy Brown in my group, and on a weekend he's maybe making the wrong decisions around when to go and beat the fullback and when to combine, or he's struggling with a certain part of his game, I wouldn't let that be known to the whole group. I might not even let that be known to the individual, but what I might start doing is considering how, as part of that team session, sticking with my coaching program, but I can put some individual stuff in to help and support that player. And it might be very much disguised within the session, so they don't even know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. You could potentially, again, it might be based on your relationship with the player. It might be based on the player and their kind of age or understanding or how intrigued they are. You might share with them why you're doing it with them. Certainly wouldn't highlight with a group, but it might be that any reactionary stuff might be more based on an individual and how I can help and support them as part of that collective group. But otherwise, I think, yeah, agree with all of you. Any of the reactionary, any of the future game stuff, I would go older age football, certainly not with young children, young players. And equally, the whole scattergun approach, going from one thing to another, I personally wouldn't do that foundation phase, but there could be an argument for doing a bit more of that when you're working up the age groups. Last one from me, and then I'm going to hand over to Andy to kind of summarise things and get any further kind of questions or thoughts from the room before we finish in 10 minutes. Don't really want to go over too much old ground from what Graham delivered around practice design and planning. As I've already mentioned, if you did miss that, it'll be on the website soon, and it was a brilliant webinar to get your teeth into. Just a few little final points from me with regards to, we've got the coaching program in place. We're looking at how that looks with regards to blocks of delivery, to those mesocycles. We're then looking at how it looks on a weekly basis, and with regards to your session plans and the practices that form that. This slide then just looks at that. So now once you've got that program in place, once you've got your different blocks of delivery in place, you're then starting to look at the makeup of your sessions. So what you're going to put into each individual session to, again, meet the needs of your players and your individuals. Now, you probably heard of the constant variable random. So your constant stuff is very much about the stuff in isolation, so getting lots of repetition and doing lots of technical work. Your variable is pretty much what it says on the tin. More variables happen. So if you were working on passing, it might be different distances, angles, more interference, a little bit of pressure. And then your random stuff goes into your 1v1s up to 11v11 and everything in between, along with your kind of game-related practices and overloads and so on. So you've then got to start working out what's right for your players. Do I do a blend of that? Do I work towards one end of the cycle to the other end, or not the pyramid, the kind of what's the word I'm looking for, the seesaw, so to speak? So what do I go with? But again, it's about knowing your players. What I would say, and what I think is really important, is that your players still need lots and lots of opportunities, regardless of whether they're the 20-year-old and you're doing a phase of play, or an 11v11 or a 9v9, or if you're working in foundation phase, need lots of opportunities to engage within the game and play the game. So they get opportunities to work on the stuff that you're doing as part of your program, where they're in opposed situations, they've got to make decisions, they've got to solve problems, they've got to deal with the ball when they're under pressure, they've got to deal with the ball when they're in tight areas, and so on and so forth. So doing stuff within the game is going to be really important. Okay. Linked to that, and we've already kind of mentioned it about, you might have your key focus, but how can you start to build and blend other bits in? So the example I used earlier was you're working on dribbling, but a different example might be I'm working on dribbling, but it might be dribbling to finish. So we're still getting lots of dribbling work, which is my key focus, but then the players are able to, in some form or fashion, break out of an area, for example, and get a shot away at goal. So you're having a key focus within your block, but you're starting to add other little bits of technical components into it. And the same could be argued for the youth development phase, where you've got a key focus, but you might have other little bits that are blended in. Last 2 points then for me would be, and it still links to games, if your example is you've got a 6-week block of delivery, so you're going working over 6 weeks, particularly I think within your kind of foundation phase and youth development phase, might be different, obviously higher up than that. But do you do 5 weeks of work on something, and then week 6, put them into a games night? So you might have been working on penetrative passes, or playing through the thirds, or playing forwards, whatever you want to call it, playing through, round over, and you've done 5 weeks work of that. Do you then go, right, week 6 now is we're working in small-sided games, and it's very much a freedom for the players to go and put into practice the work that you've helped and supported them with. So they work in bigger pitches, smaller pitches, bigger numbers, smaller numbers, maybe smaller numbers on bigger pitches, maybe bigger numbers on smaller pitches, and vice versa. And some of your overload stuff there as well. So maybe giving them an hour or 2 hours at the end of a block of work, where yes, during the programme of delivery, they've still had lots of opportunities to work within games, but the final week of this delivery is go and play in games. I might still help them support where I can. Might be more in individual stuff, might be to reinforce, but we're going to give you loads of freedom to go and put into practice some of the stuff that you've worked on, should I say, for the previous 5 weeks or however long your block is. And then your last one, and it takes us right back to my first point at the start of this, is about your coaching programme should very much link through your training to match day. So if you're a coach that's very much have your development hat on, and you're working with players in foundation phase and youth development phase, it's about helping players over the long term, helping them develop as players. Again, I'll use the words individually and collectively. So your match day becomes an extension of your training day. So don't work on something on counter-attacking with your youth development phase under 14s and then suddenly go into a game and go, we're not bothered about that today. Can you try and link it somehow so there's some sort of challenge for your players within that, or some sort of setup where we've done it in training, we're going to try and link it to the match day. Again, gives them an opportunity to apply the learning and the application that you've worked on within competitive football in a different environment, on a different pitch, against a different set of players. Andy, I'm going to hand over to you, my friend, for a quick summary, and then see if there's any final questions that have come in, but conscious that we've got about 5 minutes left, roughly.
Right, cheers, mate. Yeah, just to summarise things, so the benefits of long-term planning. One, for yourself, it makes life a lot easier for you. Volunteers, you often do struggle to find time to plan, so it just gives you that little bit of a direction, especially if you're a new coach or an inexperienced coach. It will certainly help you with that as well. But for the players, again, it goes back to the toolbox I mentioned. What you're doing is you're developing them for whatever the game's going to look like in the future. And we don't have crystal balls. So the more tools we can give them, the more we can expose them to different positions, different roles within the game, the more chance they've got of having a long future in the game. So placing your players at the heart of it. So again, know your players, and that's been a consistent message right the way throughout the courses, is do you know your players? What's the strengths, the weaknesses? How do they react? That should be a key part when you're planning. How many different blocks? Again, that's based around yourself, what you can commit to, what's your circumstances. So as you've said, it's not one size fits all. Big focus on the technical tactical. Try again the tools. How many tools can you develop within the players? One question I would pose to everybody, or one point I want you to take away in it. It was mentioned on the workshop Graham did, and I think the majority of people got an hour a week. So if you think you get your players at under sevens, and you got 1 hour a week, and on average, if you train 50 weeks of the year, and you've got them for 10 years, that's 500 hours of training you've got with the players. So going back to what Rich mentioned on the first slide was not a fast track learning. You've got 500 hours. So if you build your training programs and you try and predict what it is you're trying to do each season and what each of the players needs, you've got a real good chance of developing the players thoroughly with that. So if you've got 2 hours a week, that's fantastic. So try and look long term and think I've got a real good block of time to work with the players over the course that you've got them with. Questions that have come in. There was a one from Katie earlier, which I'll go back to. I was going to mention that earlier. She's got, could you challenge certain players if you feel that have better understanding on a reactionary side? Again, as you've said, if it's a one-off, probably not. If, for instance, I've noticed Shuffs, every time he takes his first touch, he's going back into where the ball's come from, into a crowd of players, and it's happening time and time again, then yeah, that's an individual challenge, what I might see in training, regardless of the practice I'm doing. When you receive the ball, can you take the ball in the opposite direction for where it to come from? So whether it's forwards, whether it's out the other side, whether they open up and they go backwards with it, away from where the bodies are, that's an individual challenge I can give to Shuffs. But again, try not to work on one fault. See what they do after that, see if they work it out themselves.
I think just to chuck in, Andy, though, from Katie, is it Katie Hawkins?
No, it was Katie Gibson.
Katie Gibson, sorry. Great point from Katie, because we spoke about the reactionary stuff about potentially not highlighting but recognising mistakes from players or continued mistakes, as Andy's just mentioned there, to maybe then go and help and support. Brilliant point around recognising players where they need a challenge. So reacting to that and going, how can I challenge them further from stuff that I've seen? So you're reacting to a positive as well as maybe reacting to something that we might see, rightly or wrongly, more as a negative in terms of how we can help. So love the point. Sorry, Andy.
There's a one here from Jay Little. Would you recommend playing players in different positions? AJ, a lazy winger who doesn't help us fullback out, playing with fullback, so they realise the challenges. For me, certainly. At the younger age groups, when they start getting to 15, 16s, potentially, if you know they can play multiple positions, but the younger age, definitely, because if they're playing 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, they don't really have set positions. So the more you can expose them to, the better. And again, for an example, when I was younger, I played right back, centre half majority of my career. When I played up front, it helped us because I knew what centre halves didn't like. So as an attacker, I knew which runs to make, when to run them, which areas to go into. Because as a centre half, I knew what centre halves didn't like. So you've got to give them those experiences. And again, especially around if there's certain elements of the game they're not doing, let them experience the impact that it actually has. So yeah, certainly.
And again, on that, great point from Andy. But you consider as well, Jade, around the different positions they'll play and the technical and physical demand on the players. So if I'm playing centre mid, the tech and physical demands on me very different if I'm playing left wing back in this day and age. So as Andy said, foundation phase and even transitioning to the youth development phase, transitioning around maybe 3 different positions is key. So yeah, would certainly recommend trying that with your players. But again, engage with your players, engage with your parents, let them recognise why, because some parents will be like, well, my son or daughter's a brilliant striker, so why are they now being played there? There's a reason behind it. Some of the best players in world football now are playing in positions that are very different to what they were playing in when they were kids. Andy, conscious of time, so any final questions?
Yep. No, for me, again, the chat's been excellent. Real good engagement, so thanks for that. Again, with this being new to us, we're still getting used to it, and we're hoping that everyone use it wisely and helps each other, which has certainly been happening. So thanks for that. Really enjoyed it.
Nice one. Guys, just from me, just to finish off, massive thank you for joining us. We'll be looking, I'm working tomorrow, and then I'm on holiday for 2 weeks. Should have been in Ibiza, but I'm not. I'm going to be in Sedgefield for 2 weeks. Happy days. When I'm back, I'll be putting another webinar on. It's completely different to what we've done the past 2. I'll be releasing details tomorrow. I think quite an exciting one, but it's very different to what we've done. What I would like you to do is any further questions, any feedback on tonight, please drop me an email, or if you're on social media and you come away from this tonight, drop us some stuff on our Twitter feed, which is highlighted in yellow there, and give us as much feedback, positive or negative, as you want. If it's negative, I'll probably just block you. If it's positive, we'll get it retweeted. But yeah, in all seriousness, thank you very much for your time. Keep safe, enjoy the return to football, and we'll hope to see you either on the next webinar or face-to-face at one of our live workshops when we get the green light to say we can do so. Okay, thank you very much. You can all hang up and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good night.